Iceland is changing. What kind of country could we become? Let me show you. Come with me as I explore Scotland's powerful and inspiring wee European neighbours. What vision do they offer of a brighter future for Scotland? Iceland, almost 500 miles north of Scotland, this subarctic nation is bigger than Scotland with less than 10% of our population. This place is a bit misnamed because almost a third of the lava flows on Earth have flowed on this island. There are 8 volcanoes about to erupt anytime over the next 50, 100, but maybe next year. And there have probably been 12 earthquakes already this morning. But somehow, despite living with this constant threat, the Icelanders have created one of the most equal, successful societies on Earth, even bounding back after their recent near bankruptcy. How on earth do they do it? To understand Iceland, you must learn to love volcanoes. They've shaped the landscape, the people, and their resilient mindset. To find out more, I've come to talk to Paul Einarsson at the University of Iceland. The volcanoes that have erupted here have had some massive consequences for the world. There's a suggestion that one eruption actually caused the French Revolution.
Icelandic volcanoes are certainly very active, and they can certainly produce very dangerous eruptions, which have caused not only local problems but also global catastrophes, like the 1783 eruption of Laki, poisoning all the vegetation in Iceland, and it caused a famine that killed about 1/5 of the population. It caused a lot of problems on mainland Europe. The French Revolution, there has been a connection put between those. It caused such great harm to farmers in Europe. It probably changed the weather pattern on the whole globe. There is at least an idea that it caused widespread famine in India and Chinese, where it killed maybe millions of people.
How do Icelanders live really with the level of threat that there is from the volcanoes and the physical environment?
All you hear about earthquakes or volcanoes on the news is from disasters. So people tend to associate these two things together. An earthquake has to be a disaster. And it's generally not considered to be such a terrible event if an eruption breaks out. We have 30 volcanoes to worry about. An eruption on the average about every 2 or 3 years. Most of the everyday threat that we have comes from the weather. The glaciers are shrinking. A lot of our electricity is produced by glacial rivers. So global change is really having a big effect.
How does the infrastructure work? Because if you have pipes over all of this, surely they must all fracture and there must be huge repairs.
To be precise, it's about 19 millimeters per year that East and West Iceland are spreading apart. That's about this much. You have to repair a line here, you have to repair a road because it gets torn apart. This is not a part of the big catastrophe. It's just almost like a maintenance.
I've got to say the most impressive story I heard was the eruption on the Westman Islands, which surely would have probably meant the end of the islands, but actually it seemed to me the start of having a better harbour.
The eruption of Heimaey in 1973 was really quite a unique occurrence. The whole town of 5,000 people was evacuated in a few hours during a night in the middle of the winter. And the biggest danger to the town as such was the closure of the harbour. And one of the methods that people had been experimenting with was to pump water, seawater, on the lava front to stop it or to try to divert it. And it actually succeeded in stopping it, so that when the eruption finally ended, the harbour was better than before because it was better sheltered. It was a mixture of ingenuity and luck, but that's how it ended. If there was not this hot spot, there would be no Iceland. We would be sitting on the ocean bottom at 2 or 3 kilometers depth. And we would not be human beings, we would be starfish or something else. And this is, it's quite close to the thinking of many Icelanders, that volcanoes are certainly dangerous, but they are also the reason for our existence. There is an interesting connection between Scotland and Iceland in that when the Iceland hotspot became active about 50 to 70 million years ago, then Scotland and Greenland were lying side by side. The Atlantic Ocean had not started forming, and the Iceland hotspot produced volcanoes. And it produced volcanoes, and these volcanoes are of course then in Greenland and in Scotland. So the Scottish volcanic areas, like in Skye and other places in Scotland, these are really the first signs of the Iceland hotspot. These are really Icelandic volcanoes. Most of people's ideas about how volcanoes look on the inside come from Scotland. Scotland is really the cradle of volcanology.
What do you do when you live on an island that's covered with lava like this? Well, you dig deep. Here at the ON power station, Icelanders harness the island's immense geothermal energy for industry and homes. 99% of housing in the Reykjavik area is space heated with hot water from these natural geothermal sources. It's another example of how Icelanders create a positive from their seemingly barren landscape. And here's something else we've dug up. A Scot.
Yes.
Heard the accent. Austin Yule, you're a tour leader, taking groups from Canada today around here. What do you see what just really strikes you, because you're so experienced at taking strangers and perhaps Scots to Iceland? What really hits you and what hits the people that you take?
Well, first of all, it's the unusualness of this land. They see such a small nation of less than 350,000 people with so much going on. As we would call it in Scotland, a Protestant work ethic here. So they're Protestant Lutheran here. And the idea is everybody is working towards a common goal of trying to harness the power and the energy and all the resources they have in this huge country with this small population. Every time I come here, I have a new group when I work, and I tell them all about the volcanoes and the earthquakes we have. Hekla here hasn't gone off in 18 years and is scheduled for every 10, and Katla, 60 to 90 years, hasn't gone for 100 years. But people here are just getting on with it.
You can look at something that might obliterate you and still see an opportunity in there. What does that make you think about Scotland?
I think as a nation we have become quite risk averse. We look at opportunities and we say, someone else will do that, and we'll maybe join on. We're perhaps not leaders in that field, and we very much should be.
So would you love to take the whole of Scotland here for a week?
Yes, I would love to turn the people of Scotland round and say, stop looking south, look north, look at these Nordic countries and what they're achieving.
And with the right vision, Iceland's ability to realise the potential of its barren land can be almost miraculous. Knitto, when we came here today, this was like an oasis. It wasn't very good weather, there wasn't an awful lot to see, and then suddenly, wow.
Just the name Iceland is not give you that clue that we can be growing many things here, but it surprised many people that we couldn't be picking tomatoes every day of the year, knowing that we have long, dark and cold winter. And like you said, we use the help from our nature to make it possible. So we use the hot water in the ground to warm up our houses. And here in our village, we have our own hot spring and 2 boreholes. So the water is almost boiling when it comes in here. It's about 90, 95 degrees warm. And then we use our electricity to make sun or light for the plant every day of the year. And in Iceland, we can be proud that all our electricity are green-making electricity. We have specialized in tomatoes, and today we are sending 1 ton of tomatoes to the market every day. We have a horse show and a stable visit, and then also to come into the greenhouse and see what we are doing there. Last year, 2017, we had more than 160,000 guests coming, and also it shows us opportunity to twist together like agriculture and tourism, because I think it's so real, something which so many people have interest for.
How did the financial crash affect you? Because I imagine it probably made it better to be having homegrown tomatoes, because imports must have been so expensive.
It was difficult times, because also everything which we was buying in was double priced. So it was a difficult time, but a good time also that people really start to think about how important it is to have our own production, and people start to appreciate it even more better to have Icelandic agriculture. People are more thinking about the carbon footprint, because to be traveling around the world with the food which you can easily grow or make in your own country, it's so stupid. I mean, we are going to give the world to our children, to our grandchildren. We really have to think about that. So I think the crisis helped to have the right thinking of these things also.
You know, this place is hugely impressive, but the other thing is the soup tastes great too. Icelanders don't only harness the natural resources of their island for energy and food, but also for relaxation.
Icelanders really like to go swimming or relaxing into hot tubs and pools. So this is like really popular not only for the tourist people, but also for the Icelanders to come here and relax, to go into our natural pool, which is really warm and cozy. And also because we have access to the lake, and people go into a cold lake and warm pools then afterwards. That's really nice.
Iceland has capitalised on its unique landscape with blockbusting effect, as filmmaker Kolfinna Balvinsdóttir explains.
We have had the program ongoing for 18 years now, that the state reimburses filmmakers who come from abroad all the VAT of the whole budget that they spend here. So that has been a great attraction for Hollywood production films. And that means that they come here with 200-300 people to spend the summer here. They can film 24 hours. And that obviously means that they can hire, we the people in this sector, we are provided with jobs. And obviously we could say that that has also been a part of our learning process. You know, you learn a lot from these people.
It's so far, so far away. It's so far, so far.
Make your own flag. Make your own flag.
Björk, our singer, she actually paved the way for us. She became a superstar, and that has caused lots of attention.
Raise your flag.
Could get so many famous artists to come here, and obviously that helps us in the creativity. We actually per capita are doing very well when it comes to music, literature, filmmaking, etc. We are very well protected by our state. We have funds that we can easily access. Well, I've mostly been doing documentary films about social issues in particular, and I'm now writing a film about immigrants coming to Iceland. The nature is a great help for us to keep the mind vivid and keep this creativity up. In school, we do actually study music and literature and knitting and carpentry, and it's as a part of our curriculum. There has been a great interest in Nordic literature, detective stories, for example. It doesn't relate to me because we don't have any crime rate in Iceland, so I find it kind of difficult to imagine that. But I think that is also a great advertisement for the country, that these kind of programs become popular abroad. Very strong identity, yes. We are very proud of being who we are. We are winning everybody in football, including the English.
And we would love that the whole Tartan army and all of Scotland would join Team Iceland and cheer with us this summer.
I mean, anything is better than pretending to support England, right?
Somehow people often think, because we are only 358,153 people at the moment, Somehow people often think that if you come from a small country that you will think smaller. But I actually think it's vice versa. The smaller the unity, the better it functions, the better opportunities you have in life, and therefore you think bigger. When you ask me, I actually don't think I've ever seen a Scottish film. And I wonder why the Scottish are progressing so slowly. But I do feel for them, and I am a true follower of their independence. I think that we should leave England all alone.
Gott kvöld.
And part of that film's success is because Iceland's pretty well served in broadcasting too. And remember, their population's no bigger than Aberdeen and Dundee combined.
So RUV stands for Ríkisútvarpið, which literally translates into state radio in English, meaning it's the public service broadcaster of Iceland. The scope of what we do is fairly broad. I mean, we run a fairly extensive website which covers everything from children's services to news to catch-up services to sports. On radio, we have several channels, and then we run some online radio services. We just started a online radio station aimed at younger people, so up until maybe the age of 30, seeing how that works. We have actually have an increased commitment to drama in recent years. Now I think there's probably around 4 series on an annual basis, which is quite a lot when you consider how small both RUV and Iceland are. Nordic Noir, of course, has created a boom for drama everywhere, and that also means that we have increased access to funding from those who want to co-produce what we do. We've co-produced drama with the Germans, with the BBC, with many others. The biggest one, the most expensive one, which was shown all over the world. I mean, I think we paid probably 10% of the cost. It's Icelandic production, Icelandic actors, and an Icelandic script in Icelandic in Iceland. I think it sounds strange, but I think our importance when it comes to sort of the national identity and sort of holding a mirror up to ourselves has increased, partly because of the economic crisis and everything that happened after 2008. But also because there's a lot of stuff coming in from abroad, all those streaming services and satellite channels and whatnot, and it's easy to get lost in that mixture, and RÚV, with its focus on Icelandic news, Icelandic stories, Icelandic life, Icelandic sports, Icelandic people, Icelandic language, I think we play a fairly significant role in not maintaining sort of the hype of what we are and who we are, but sort of critically reflecting on who we are and who we would like to be.
Iceland's geology has even shaped its politics. Westminster makes a claim to being the mother of parliaments, but this most definitely is the great-grandmother of the lot. This is the world's earliest parliament here at Thingvellir. It's right at the centre of the island, and it's been used as a parliament since 930 because it was an equal distance for everyone to travel to get here, even though this is right at the heart of the volcanic area, and it's almost at the point where 2 tectonic plates are pulling apart constantly. It was used as a parliament until 1790, when a massive eruption caused the people and the parliament to seek the shelter of Reykjavik. But the story didn't stop at Thingvellir. The parliament moved here to Reykjavik, literally the big smoke. And I'm here to meet Rósa Björk Brynjólfsdóttir, who's an MP, and she's going to tell us more. We know that Iceland had the world's oldest parliament. But what was its history after that big beginning, sitting in the rocks at Thingvellir? It moved to Reykjavik, and what happened next?
We had the sovereignty in 1918. We're celebrating that now, 100 years of sovereignty. We had also the independence of Iceland in 1944. So that was a huge milestone after the parliament came here.
You could say you were the poorest country in Europe, and yet in 1944, you became independent without a second thought.
In the 17th and 18th century, Iceland was regarded as a very valuable place, not because of the fish or the geothermal power like we do today, but because we had sulfur mines. Sulfur mines. So that was one of the reasons why the King of Denmark wanted to keep Iceland and trade this monopoly within Iceland as well. The Danes, as colony, country, you can say they didn't treat us very well. So they didn't allow any Icelanders to get some situation or power within their own country. And the condition of life for Icelanders had been extremely hard for many centuries, actually. Some Danes were disappointed towards the Icelanders that as soon as Denmark was occupied by the Germans, the Icelanders grabbed the opportunity and declared independence. The parliament at the time met in Alþingi, and there the Parliament of Iceland declared independence, just sent the King of Denmark a letter.
So this was characteristic of Iceland. There was no violence, no bloodshed. It was just a very rational thing.
The ones that were steering the independence movement were studying in Copenhagen, in Denmark. So these were people of education and literature. And Jón Sigurðsson was a man of literature, and we sometimes say and use the word or phrases that this was a revolution of the pen. This was something that was written about constantly, and the Icelanders actually used the pen and words and letters to put their issue forward, which I believe is a very beautiful way to do it.
Is part of that culture the Celtic connection?
I would say so, yes. I would say so, because our DNA is, of course, as has been measured and shown, 60% approximately Norwegian, and then 40% of the Celtic Islands and northern part of Scotland. And this Celtic history is very, very alive in Icelandic culture. It has always been. And it's quite interesting to think about it, that the Celtic side is stronger among female in Iceland. So the storytelling and the history and the verbal storytelling, you can assume that comes from women in Iceland.
And in your whole history, has that always been the case, that no one has had any doubt, really, that you would be better as an independent country?
No. It was in line with the wish of the people and the nation. And I think when you have been feeling these difficult living conditions on your skin for so many centuries, then you're a bit fed up with that, and more than that. And when you get some kind of belief and self-confident in the fact that you can be better off. Of course, it's a journey that you don't know where it ends. But every good journey, you have to start them somewhere. And I think that the majority of Iceland, the enormous majority of Iceland was, at the time, very positive and happy about that.
Are you special?
I think Icelanders are special as any other countries are, and any other people and populations are. I think what is interesting with the Icelandic population is that it's very mixed. It's an island, of course, with a strong heritage and culture, a little bit like the Scottish and the other North Atlantic peoples. I think that the Icelanders, they always look at themselves as they can do anything. There are no limits. And that can both be a very positive power, but also very, it can also be something that it can hinder you in doing maybe things in a civilized way.
Á þann hátt íslenska bjartsýni, æðruleysi og samstöðu að vopni munum við standa storminn á okkur.
But no matter how resilient a nation you may be, there are global events you never see coming. The 2008 crash was a seismic financial event that brought Iceland to its knees. In many ways, the Harpa Concert Hall and Conference Centre came to symbolise the crash. This distinctive glass structure, inspired by the basalt landscape of Iceland, with its precarious-looking walkways and stunning perspectives, was commissioned during the heady days when Iceland was on a roll. After its mighty fall, the building remained half-built, resented by many as an example of national excess and overconfidence. But Harpa was finished and is now a magnet for locals and visitors who've played a vital role in Iceland's economic recovery. Jon Baldwin Hannibalsson can explain more about Iceland's crash. What caused the financial crash in Iceland?
After the crash, Parliament appointed 3 wise men to give a thorough analysis with full resources and foreign expertise on the causes of the crash. On the technicalities of the financial system, they said, it is as if the owners of the Icelandic banks operated on the premise that the best way to rob a bank is to own a bank. Almost every basic rule of prudence was broken, be it risk management, market manipulation, insider trading, heavy lending to related companies, even owned by the owners of the banks, creative accounting, everything. And this was the basis for another thing which we did correctly, which was to bring to justice those individuals, plutocrats, high officials in the banks who had actually not only turned out to be financial crooks, but broke the law. All of this was, of course, under the overall influence of the ideology of neoliberalism. The government at the time actually wrote it into the programs that the purpose was to make Iceland a financial center. The mantra was market fundamentalism, markets were sovereign, markets were infallible, minimum state interference. That was the program. We have learned a lot about ourselves. It inspired a spontaneous grassroots movement which wanted to rewrite the constitution.
Would it be true to say that Gordon Brown, in a strange kind of way, actually helped Iceland come out of the financial crash?
It was their decision to place not only the Icelandic banks in London, but the Central Bank of Iceland and the government of Iceland on the list under the Law of Terrorism Act. This is even worse than a declaration of war because it's a license for annihilation almost. So the whole financial system of Iceland went bankrupt. There was no way that those banks could be bailed out, unlike, for instance, in Greece or in Ireland. The creditors, mainly German banks, were forced to write off a lot of the debt. It is a part of the explanation why Iceland recovered sooner and in a more robust way than most others.
So are you saying then that you really want to thank Gordon Brown?
If I would say that, my countrymen would not be very grateful to me. But I stress that this was not what he meant to do.
Sure. When you were foreign minister, you went to Lithuania during its important moments of trying to become an independent country. Why did you think that was Iceland's problem? Why did you go?
Mr. Gorbachev was ready to do a lot, but he set the limit to this. He would never accept the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The independence struggle of the Baltic states was about leaving the Soviet Union for the simple reason that they had been occupied, they had been annexed into the Soviet Union illegally and against their will.
Would it be fair to say that actually your recognition of Lithuania was what helped that country become independent?
It's too much to say that we saved them, they saved themselves. But your point is well taken. There are times when the big guys fail or have a different agenda, when small countries, through their solidarity, can actually change the course of events.
Volcanic ash has caused the worst disruption in air travel since 9/11.
Incredibly, a volcanic eruption then grounded much of Europe. But again, this was an opportunity to put Iceland on the map.
The first days of the volcanic eruption were of course a crisis. In the back of our heads, I think, was that this was a strange opportunity as well. We realized that Iceland was in the focus of the world like never before. The currency of the Icelandic krona had devalued so much that Iceland became affordable for tourists more than before. The first thing was a new marketing plan, which was focused on Iceland as an adventure destination. The growth has been phenomenal in all senses, both for the company and for Icelandic tourism. Maybe those two events coincided in our favor.
The crash also led to a re-energised Icelandic politics, with citizens engaging and reflecting on their future like never before.
It was a really interesting time when everything seemed possible.
Writer Andri Snær Magnusson explored this new way of thinking about Iceland in his fascinating book, Dreamland, a self-help manual for a frightened nation.
If you go downtown to the business center of Reykjavik, you can see the White House, where Reagan and Gorbachev met, where communism fell. The house next door is the third biggest crash in capitalist history. That is the headquarters of Kaupthing Bank. So you'd see the crash of capitalism and communism side by side.
Kaupthing is the biggest company in Iceland. It's a company where you get all the benefits of a huge, global, multi-million... I mean, how many millions live in Iceland?
300,000.
300,000 million?
No, just 300,000.
Ah, so Kaupthing is the biggest company in this tiny little country.
These regimes would, give you a code of language, how to use, how to talk. And suddenly that had collapsed and the other had collapsed and the language was suddenly like free. What do you say when you don't have a firm ground to speak on?
Your book, which I read, and actually I have to say, inspired me to write a book in Scotland called Blossom, which was similarly trying to tackle all the difficult problems of our countries, is really seems to be trying to say there's a struggle for the heart of Iceland going on.
Well, basically we had this strange situation where politicians told us that unless we would get 4 or 5 huge aluminum smelters running in Iceland, we would not have a welfare system and all these things that we want as a prosperous nation. And they were saying we would have to sacrifice the highlands of Iceland, many of the most beautiful rivers in Iceland and many of the greatest geothermal areas, that we would have to plunder them in order to have welfare and just be an independent, prosperous nation. And this was something people actually strongly believed. We were not told that this was a choice to be made, but this was some kind of an ultimatum, that we had to do this, make a deal with 3, 4, 5 aluminum corporations. And I thought this was devastating. I thought this was just terrible. Many of my favorite places in the Highlands, many of the most beautiful areas, were to be just bulldozed to serve these corporations. But there was something that really troubled me as a citizen. And I was wondering, what are they saying? What is this language they're using? What are they telling us? And, somebody says 30 terawatt hours. And, it sounds wise. It sounds like something thought out. It sounds scientific. And it would be on the headlines of newspapers. Still, we have only harnessed 15% of the 30 terawatt hours
we were going to sell. And when I calculated how many rivers you would have to dam to reach 30 terawatt hours, you would have to take all the rivers in the west, all the rivers in the north, all the rivers in the east and the south, and the Central Highlands, and still we needed about 2 terawatt hours. So they were promising they could harness a little bit more than all the rivers in Iceland. And then I was like, okay, something is deeply wrong here. And suddenly me as a concerned citizen could see huge faults in what looked like firm, stable, and should be conservative bodies of the government. And that the language they were using was just total bullshit. It was just bullshit. It was just, and me as a fantasy writer, I was suddenly in the role of grounding our engineers, telling them, my role is fantasy, your role is reality, and you should tell me the truth. In the end, I could find like what would be left in the economy would be the wages of the workers. So you could see how you can colonize people's minds into believing somebody being the pillar of your economy, while you are actually their pillar. That is, we are providing Alcoa with billions of dollars in benefits, while they are providing us, yes, they are occupying the time of 400 people that could also be doing something else. And then the deeper thing was this insecurity. There was some kind of deep insecurity embodied in the psyche of the nation. It could easily be harnessed politically. There is this kind of old survival struggle, this strength, all these elements that used to be strengths possibly, turned out in this case to be weaknesses that could be harnessed and almost colonized. So in my book I was writing that, yes, maybe in some way it is a part solution for them, but in other ways they are sacrificing their independence. They're actually giving off all their power to an aluminum company that has not been doing well in many places of the world. And when they want to leave a similar village, they just leave it. They're not in there for the welfare. I thought somebody has to point out the alternatives. And if you harness all these small things, the overall kind of success of that will be bigger than a single smelter.
The new Icelandic politics produced radical ways of thinking about how politics could be done, including revising the nation's very foundation of democracy, the constitution.
You were one of the people that put together the crowdsourced constitution, which has actually entrapped everybody, ensnared everybody's attention across the world for its boldness. What was the reason for needing to do that?
Well, Iceland became independent in 1944. Let's start back. Big Bang. We have Big Bang. No, but sorry, I have to explain. Because after that, we decided, okay, Danes were occupied by the Nazis, so we're just going to sneak away, because we've been trying for ages to get away, and finally we had a moment there. So we were doing that, and we said, okay, let's just have the constitution from Denmark, change the word king with president, and run. So we just voted on the two things. Do we want to be independent? Secondly, do we want this to be the constitution? And everybody was in agreement that this should only be a preliminary constitution. However, now, 70 years later, we still have that old Danish crappy constitution, you know, and we've always intended to write our own. It's part of being a real independent nation, in my opinion, to have your own social contract. So why would you be a society or a nation if you can't even agree upon your own foundational law? And then after the crash in Iceland in 2008, there was this amazing moment of clarity, you know, where people finally were like, okay, so hang on, why are we doing this? You know, why do we have the law? Why do we have all the system? What we thought we had was completely not working, so now we have to make a new one. And then finally there was this like enough sort of general support, especially from the power holders, to actually do this, you know, well. So they decided, okay, we've been trying to do this for years without any success ourselves. Let's give it to the people. So they had this amazing National Assembly with 1,000 randomly selected people coming together for a whole day in a sports complex, just deciding upon the values of that new constitution. And then after that, and that was all streamed and online and so on, that was back in 2011. And after that, they had the elections where 25 people got elected, including myself. And we decided, after a little bit of a stubbly beginning, that we would try to be the change. So let's open it up. We're asking them to be transparent, our power holders. We're asking them to be accountable. Let's do that then ourselves. So we only had one IT guy, and we were doing this all on the run. We only had 4 months to write the thing. But we decided to, okay, let's just do this, you know. Let's do it and let everybody comment on it and see what we're doing as we do it.
Son of Philosophy says ideas from the public should always be welcome, but much thought and effort ought to be required to make them politically viable.
How did you manage that?
We connected our website to Facebook. Every week we published a draft. So first time we published it, it was just the chapters, you know, and people could comment through their Facebook account saying like, okay, why isn't this in front of this or whatever, you know? And when we first published it online, we were really scared because you know the way people can talk online sometimes it's just foul, you know. So we thought, okay, they're going to go like at us, you know, and it's going to be one ugly mess, you know. But that did not happen at all. And actually what happened was that the people, they sort of repaid the trust that we gave them with a lot of dignity in the conversation. So we got great ideas coming from the people through that site, and also people could just send us proposals. We also, of course, reached out a lot to the experts and, you know, drew them in. But basically the openness of it was not only just to get more ideas and to make it sort of more wide, but also to create ownership, you know, that we together would do this, you know. It's about democracy in the whole. It's about if people should believe that we can actually deepen democracy as a concept, or if we should just forget about it. Because we're looking at the same trends everywhere, where people are losing trust in the representatives. They don't bother to show up. They feel they can't have any say in anything, and power is somewhere completely different than to where they're at. Nobody listens to them. This is so understandable. Why should I participate in a dance that isn't really about me or for me, or even, I don't even like the tune playing in the background, you know, why should I? So we need to try to use examples like this in Iceland, where people have actually been able to participate and they've delivered something much greater than if they wouldn't have participated, and make it into reality to show that this is a viable path, you know.
And what would you say at the moment are the odds of this actually happening?
The surveys show that the support is only rising. So you're not going to ignore this. There's no way that you can. I don't know if we will get it exactly the same way that we wrote it, but we will get it as the basis for a new constitution. I'm 100% sure.
So, what do our Icelanders think about Scotland and its future?
Norway is the most successful country on earth in how to utilize their natural resources. You can learn a lot from how they have done it, both in terms of efficiency and profitability, but also in terms of meeting ecological standards and sustainability.
My feeling is that you're in the right path, or Scots are in the right path of thinking very carefully about a second referendum. I'm not very positive on Brexit. I'm not very positive on the result of the Brexit. So I'm not very positive that the Scots will gain something on Brexit.
Do you think Scotland has the resources to be able to be a prosperous, independent country?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Why do you think we doubt it?
I think it's easier for an island who is long and far away from the parliament or the king or the queen or whatever. I think it's easier than being very close to the one that you have been in alliance with for centuries.
I mean, what would you say to Scots who actually are perhaps more risk averse than you are?
Mm-hmm. If you look at it, where is the vehicle going? Is this a nice direction? Is this where we want to steer our vehicle? Because we have a choice. I would ask that question. And if it seems like, yeah, it's not hazardous, it's sort of no risks involved, and that's enough for you, and you think that's going to make your kids okay in the future, fine. But if you think you can go to a more beautiful location and you can find something more spectacular and maybe more sustainable for your kids and their kids, and just take the turn, I would say.
I don't know a single individual anywhere in the world who has the slightest doubt that Scotland has all the intellectual capacity, all the technical know-how, all the historical, cultural resources to go it alone to be an independent country. Yes.
And I want to say to Scottish people that might be listening, nothing's going to happen just by sitting there and hoping. You know, you have to actually do stuff. And I know you've been fighting a lot and I know you're tired, but you have to continue. It's totally worth it.
Well, it's been another extraordinary 4 days here on Iceland. The overwhelming message that you get from everybody is their sheer ability to cope with problems that really would have flattened any other country. There's Iceland Air. The minute that the country goes belly up financially, they see it as an opportunity to get people here because finally the place is affordable, and they go to the government and buy planes. Geologists who actually say that if there weren't volcanoes here and therefore the constant threat of eruption, the island wouldn't exist and they wouldn't be on it and they wouldn't be Icelanders. You hear from Kolfinna, who is part of the huge filmmaking industry here because of their landscape. And their landscape is a certain kind of one, but you know, Scotland's is infinitely more beautiful and diverse, and she has never seen a single Scottish film. It all makes you wonder what we're doing with the huge resources we've got and whether or not we can rise to the challenge that Katrin Oddsdottir has raised to us, which is whether we can embrace uncertainty because in it something beautiful awaits. If you'd like to see more films about our successful wee neighbours, please support our crowdfunder.